Hello, everyone, and a very warm welcome to another episode of our series Start to Win. Now, to commemorate the launch of Windows 11, Your Story is creating a specially curated five-part series titled Start Your Win, featuring five founders from the startup ecosystem to celebrate the extraordinary impact driven by these change makers. Quite like the pillars of Windows 11, these change makers believe that success is the product of consistency, productivity, collaboration, the choices you make, and of course, being secure in the belief of your idea. In our second episode, we will focus on how the choice that you make and the choices that you make can be key to unlocking growth, not only for you, but also for your business. So for that, we have with us Deepak Jayaraman, the creator and curator of the Play to Potential podcast. He is also an executive coach and transition advisor. Now, choices, of course, as we know, can make or break a project or an entire business, and they often involve complex and unpredictable interpersonal issues too. At his podcast on playtopotential.com, Deepak finds it fulfilling to make a difference to people at these pivotal points in their journey with his mentorship. So with that said, welcome Deepak. Great to have you on board with us.
Thank you, Shivani. Thanks for the opportunity.
So Deepak, getting straight to it, you started your career as a management consultant and worked across some of, the big four as it's called in consultancy, and now you're an executive coach working with high profile leaders. So how did all of this come about? I'm sure there was a big transition that happened. Tell us a bit about your journey, some of the toughest choices that you had to make and how you really approached all of this.
Wow, it's a big question, Shivani. Let me take a stab at some of the key moments. I would say the first 30 odd years, 33 years, I would say was a reasonably predictable life. Engineer, went to IIT Madras, got an opportunity to study at IMA. And then I felt my skills were in problem solving. So that took me to consulting. I was with KPMG in London and in India for a while. And then I wanted to pursue a global career, and that took me to London Business School and then McKinsey. I would say I would characterize all this as having a hammer and looking for a nail to hit, saying problem solving is my strength. But 2008, March 2nd, I remember I got to know that my father was diagnosed with late stage cancer back in Chennai. So that was a tough phase where we had to decide, should we fly in and fly out and take care of the situation, or should we relocate? And we had a big loan in pounds to take care of. And I'm very grateful that my wife was supportive, and we decided to move to India and decided to put life ahead of work. I think that's the way I would characterize that choice. That's sort of a big decision we took, and I'm very grateful for that. Next 6 months were very precious, but that also gave me an opportunity to step back and reflect a little bit on what gave me energy. And one of my mentors at McKinsey, a gentleman called Ramesh Mangaleshwaran, actually nudged me saying, "You seem to have the people orientation. Have you thought about search?" And he introduced me to this firm, Egon Zehnder, which helps companies recruit CEOs, CXOs, and board members. So that took me to Egon Zehnder, where I felt I could spend more time on people-related matters while serving clients. At Egon Zehnder, enjoyed the journey, but I realized that I enjoyed the candidate conversations more than the client conversations. One of my friends told me, you have more of a coaching mindset than a poaching mindset. That was sort of insight number one. And second is, I think when I had my second child, I was also solving for a little more balance on the work front and the home front. And I realized that when you work for a professional services organization, somebody else sets the pace of the treadmill. So I think a combination of these factors led me to start my own practice about 5 years back. And I said, let me focus on transitions, because that's when problems are complex, stakes are high, and people are lonely, whether it's a role transition, leadership transition, or a career transition. So I set up an advisory coaching practice, but with a focus on transitions. And I felt there was a certain element of curiosity in me. It was triggered by the book called A Curious Mind, written by a Hollywood producer called Brian Grazer, who's made the movies like Beautiful Mind and Apollo 13. He says that every week he goes and has a conversation with a different person, and somehow the concoction of ideas stimulates new thoughts, and that leads to movies. So I said, is there something I could do more as my learning journey and hopefully share it with the people and make a difference? And that's the genesis of the podcast. So in a way, if I had to sort of characterize it, I think it's been a journey from focusing on skills to really leaning into what gives me energy, and that's been quite fulfilling.
That's a great way of looking at it, Deepak, and the way you decided to sort of put life ahead of work and take all the decisions from there on. So talking about choices, of course, life throws a lot at you, and it totally depends on what choices you make at the end of the day. With the widest range of form factors to empower users, we've also looking at Windows 11, the operating system that's recently launched. That's all about freedom of choice as well. And now when we talk about, entrepreneurship, a lot of leaders in that space come to you for mentorship. And there as well, it's all about freedom to make your own rules for your business. So how do you advise leaders to go about making their choices?
That's a great question again, Shivani. And once again, I tell people in the context of the careers that, as we think about, just like businesses need to think about where to play and how to win, all of us need to think about the two questions, where to go and how to grow. And actually, where to go is a strategy question, and how to grow is often an operational question. And if you get the where to go wrong, there's no point figuring out the how to win. So you're right. I think choice is important, and I think all the more because I'm influenced by this work of this is behavioral economist Barry Schwartz. He's written a book called Paradox of Choice, and he says that in a world of abundance, you would think that consumers are happier, but he goes on to say it turns out they're actually less happy for a couple of reasons. One is there is FOMO. You feel you've missed out on something because there's, out of 100 things you did one thing and you wonder if you missed on the 99 other things. And second is decision making has become complex. Earlier it was just simple. Should I do a BCom or a BA or engineering? Now it's like, there are some 100 options for kids to choose from, whatever. Or earlier we had DD1 and DD2. Now we have millions of media channels, including YourStory media to consume, right? So it's a tough world. So I generally tell people start with a healthy level of self-awareness. And self-awareness, I feel, is a combination of both introspection, having some sort of a reflection or an introspection practice, but also coupled with some feedback. The second piece I say is sometimes, what seems like choices, you don't have to be constrained by what's visible to you in front of you. I remember going to a coffee shop a while back, and this was before Starbucks, and baristas came in. And the guy said, which size do you want? Do you want medium or large? And I paused there for a minute. I said, do you have a small? He said, yeah, we do have a small. So give me the small. So sometimes, the world offers you some options, but the real thing you want might be something else. So I tell people, try and be a little creative in terms of generating the set of options in front of you. Don't be restricted to what's front and center. And finally, from a decision-making perspective, I find that criteria need to be driven by awareness in terms of what matters to you. I see a lot of people hurtling down the path because it makes sense for somebody else. I was talking to an entrepreneur yesterday actually, and she was saying that, I'm venture invested, I've got some pedigreed investors with me, but I'm not sure if becoming a unicorn is something that excites me. I'm doing this because I feel it's a duty. But when I really look at what gives me energy, maybe it's something else. So be true to who you are and what gives you energy, because I feel that's what will help you play the long game of life. And finally, I would say have a board of directors, not the official board of directors, but have an informal pool of advisors that you can lean on to, who know you over a period of time, who care for you, and who will show you the mirror and help you make a better decision. So those are some of the things that come to mind in the context of making a meaningful decision.
Right, Deepak, some very refreshing thoughts there. Key among those, as you pointed out, self-awareness is, of course, key in making the right choices, and also don't feel too restricted, by the limited choices that you have. Sort of explore beyond that. Now, being a leader is also about making tough choices, because the right choices may not always be the easy ones. So what do you do when you have to make a tough choice in terms of what are the deciding factors, how should you or how should one really stack things up and figure it out?
It's a big question, Shivani. Again, not an expert on decision making and choice by any chance, by any means, but a few things come to mind. One is, I think, as I said earlier, figure out what we are solving for. One thing I've learned is sometimes if we get the question wrong, more often than not, the answer is always wrong. So just sharpen the question around what exactly are you solving for, whether it's a personal choice, whether it's a corporate choice. I think that very often one of our professors in B school would always say, spend a disproportionate amount of time sharpening the question. That's like sharpening the axe before you cut the tree. Finding the answer is a bit like cutting the tree. So that's one. Second, I would say I feel it's helpful to understand the problem from different perspectives and stakeholders, right? What does this decision mean for the investor? What does it mean for the family? What does it mean for the employees, and so on and so forth? So being mindful of the various stakeholders for a decision, I think, is important. And third, I find is sometimes some sort of a reflection or a journaling process to really let your thoughts settle down. I think the other piece I've started reflecting on more and more is, Adam Grant of Wharton uses the term precrastination. No, we all know that procrastination often is not a good thing. But he goes on to say that actually even precrastination is not helpful, which is making a decision too quickly. I think there is merit in sort of marinating in a choice for a while and letting the answer emerge. So that's the third point I would say. Don't precrastinate. Just give it the right amount of time to sleep over it, to understand the things from various angles. And finally, I would say, I find it helpful to explicitly articulate the why behind a decision once you've taken a decision. I find that once you've done that, it's helpful to go back to the why on a bad day. All of us, after taking a decision, go through ups and downs. You have a bad day, you have a rainy day. And I find that if one has articulated the why very clearly to oneself and to the people around oneself, then I think it sort of gives you the resilience to walk that path even if things don't go per plan. So those are some thoughts that come to mind in the context of a tough decision.
Sure, that really helps, provide a lot of clarity even to, people like us. So that was just great listening to that, Deepak, and if you could also give us, some sort of examples or, tangible, inspiring cases, people that you worked with on how making the right decision really led to a transformational outcome.
I would say if I may talk about my instance, right, the one decision I made was to move from coaching to coaching, as I tell people. And I think it seems like a simple change of word, change of an alphabet, but I think it fundamentally changed the rhythm of my life, and I'm very grateful for that. And second piece I feel is, very early on, initially a lot of people said, set up an advisory organization, so set it up as a company. So I set it up as a private limited company, even though it was just me hoping that I could build an advisory practice. But over time, I realized that, one of my friends also told me, you seem to have a little bit of an artisanal mindset. It's a bit like the Renaissance painters. You like to do your painting. I don't think you need to run a painting school. And I think that was, again, useful advice. So I feel the choice I made was not to scale. I said it will be me, my time, almost like how a cardiac surgeon would have his or her practice. So I said, let me treat it as a practice and focus on building my capability and get better at surgery. I don't need to run a hospital. Very often, I find that people think that by default, as you age, driving scale is the default pathway. So after some reflection, I felt scale doesn't excite me. And I started focusing on what gains energy. And both the and the advisory work anchor around having fulfilling conversations with inspiring people. And that's been a fulfilling journey. Transformational, I don't know, but it's definitely led to a lot of fulfillment in my case.
Right, Deepak, thank you so much, for sharing your thoughts and insights with us, some very refreshing viewpoints that you brought in as well. And of course, thanks for taking out the time to share your journey with us. Clearly, a lot of choices that you've made, very transformational outcome for, all of us that didn't know about your journey. It was, of course, very enlightening to hear you talk about making those right choices and how it can truly have an inspiring and long-lasting impact, not just on businesses, but of course, as you pointed out, on our personal as well as professional lives. So thank you for that. Now, choice, of course, is truly empowering, and Windows 11 is all about freedom of choice with the widest range of form factors and supports a hybrid workforce across devices for higher retention and satisfaction. Do note that Microsoft Windows 11 Pro for Business is now available for download. Thank you to our viewers as well for tuning in, and do stay tuned for the next episode in the Start Your Win series that is powered by YourStory along with Microsoft, where we will talk to yet another founder and dive into another foundational pillar of Microsoft Windows 11. Till then, stay safe and stay healthy.